Hello and most welcome to 1556 of the series, and I will now continue with the wonderful article of Thomas J. McFarlane, Quantum Physics, Depth Psychology and Beyond. And we are presently on page 27. We have entered into the realm of the subtle and the gross, the inner and the outer. And there seemed to be some mysterious connection between what is gross and outer and what is subtle is inner. A sort of a magical connection. And this is depicted at page 27 as a circle. The circle and the line have a left-right reflection symmetry. Its form is unchanged if left and right are exchanged. This symmetry shows us that the interior-exterior distinction, that is, the distinction between the inner and the outer, or between knowing and being, are not ultimately different. In other words, this distinction is an artifact of dividing the circle, or line with a vertical line, in two halves. Calling one half inner and the other half outer. Upon reflection, each inner point on the left is transformed into a corresponding outer point on the right and vice versa. This reflection symmetry thus illustrates that the knower and the known arise together in mutual dependence and are ultimately identical. More specifically, subtle levels of inner knowing correspond to equally subtle levels of outer being. While gross levels of inner knowing correspond to equally gross levels of outer being. This reflection symmetry thus illustrates the principle that every objective level of being requires a corresponding subjective level of knowledge in order to know it. The circle also has an upper-lower reflection symmetry. Its form is invariant when points in the upper half are switched with points in the lower half. Unlike the left-right symmetry, this symmetry is broken when the circle is projected onto the line. There's no reflection symmetry of the line that exchanges small valued points with large valued points. The linear mandala thus conceals the symmetry between subtle and gross levels of reality. As revealed by the circle, there is a symmetry between these sets of points. The exchange of upper and lower points in the circle corresponds to an exchange between small valued points, gross objects, and large valued points, subtle objects. This reflection symmetry thus reveals a mutual dependence and ultimate identity of subtle and gross objects. In particular, the most concrete manifest object at 0,1 is transformed to the infinitely subtle point at infinity, 0 minus 1. This equivalence symbolizes the complete identity of the unmanifest subject with the most concrete of manifest objects. That is, emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. While paradoxical from the perspective of the line, this identity is obvious from the perspective of the circle. More generally, points of increasing degrees of subtlety correspond with points of increasing degrees of concreteness. This correspondence illustrates that both via positiva and via negativa are mirror images, both approaching the ineffable one. The former begins by affirming attributes most closely related to the one. While the latter begins by negating attributes most remote from it. These mirror images arise in dependence upon each other, and the degree of one corresponds to the degree of the other. The reflection symmetry of the circle reveals that they are equivalent. They are two ways of approaching the one. beyond involution and evolution. The upper-lower reflection symmetry also symbolizes the correspondence of the levels of involution. That is, precession, prodos, with the levels of evolution, reversion, epsirophy, epistrophy, epistrophy. More specifically, the evolutionary process of transcend and include that moves from gross to subtle is the mirror image of the involutionary process of restrict and exclude that moves from subtle to gross. Involution corresponds to a movement from the bottom of the circle to the top, while evolution corresponds to a movement from the top of the circle to the bottom. The upper-lower reflection symmetry inverts these movements, however, and reveals that involution and evolution are two perspectives of the same movement. Another way of understanding this equivalence is to say that involution is a level seen as moving from one to many, while evolution is the same level seen as moving from many to one. The shift between these 2 points of view corresponds to the horizontal reflection. From the perspective of the circle, however, the point is not really moving either way, and yet it can be seen as moving both ways. If we imagine points moving around the circle in both directions, we see them flowing through the processes of involution and evolution, the unfolding of the one to reveal the many, and an enfolding of the many back into the one. So you see here, I think it's obviously clear that there could be a reversal of inner and outer. How do we tell that something is purely inner and not outer? This is a definitely more healthy way of approaching the question. It's an opening up of definitive doubt. It's a going into a deepening of understanding. I will round up there and thank John McFarlane, and I thank you for listening and watching as well. Until next time, do take care. Bye bye.